If you want to learn how to make this ragdoll system in Roblox Studio, make sure to stick around till the end of the video. To gain a better understanding of how Roblox characters stick together, all the body parts stick together, yet still are able to be animated, we have to look into one asset in particular. The Motor 6D constraint is a constraint that joins two parts together but still allows them to be animated. That brings us to our next constraint, the ball socket constraint. It joins two parts together just like the Motor 6D. However, it allows them to swing freely on all their axes. Now we can get to programming. Now, I've set up this script in a way that's just going to allow us to structure it better. We'll make our way down this little template, starting by defining our services, which will, all we need is the player service, so we can detect when a player has been added to the game. Then we'll define our variables, make some functions, connect some events, and then any other required things to set up the script. So only variable that you're really gonna need is the joints cache, and I'll go into what that really is in just a second. But for now, I'm just going to connect this player added event so we can detect when they're added, and then at some point figure out when their character dies. So now we need the character added event. And this basically just tells us when a character has been added to the map. So now we're going to get the humanoid by just doing character.humanoid. And I'm not going to use wait for child because the humanoid is one of the first things that is loaded into the character once it spawns in. So it's not necessary. Now I'm just going to connect to the died event, which tells us when the character dies, of course. And that's all we need for now. And now we're gonna create the ragdoll function. We're just gonna control this whole thing. However, before we can do that, we also need another function, which gets a table of every Motor 6D in their character so that we can then replace them with ball socket joints. This will also be a function of the character. So now we could get a table of all the constraints and then loop through the character's descendants. Now, a descendant is kind of like a child, but it's every single object that is inside the character. So even things that are inside the arms, the humanoid, everything. And if the object is a Motor 6D, then we're of course going to want to add it to our constraints table. Then just return this table. Now that we can get all of our constraints, we're actually going to add it to the joints cache. Now cache basically assigns values to keys, kind of like a dictionary but with objects. So we could do joints cache character equals get Motor 6D's character, which will give us a list of all the Motor 6Ds in their character, which is going to be useful because if we just did what we did here when they died, it actually delayed their respawn time, which is really annoying. So now we can get back to that ragdoll function and define a humanoid variable. And and just set its state type to alright, so I'm just going to set the state to physics, which is basically just going to make this script run a little bit better. Now I'm going to loop through all those Motor 6Ds that I cached earlier. By using the character model right there. And now we could create two attachments. So A0 and A1, which are just going to be the attachments that will tell the ball socket joint where to join things together. Now A0 dot C frame equals motor 6D dot C0, and the C0 is basically a C frame where the motor 6D joins something, so it's basically the same thing that we're doing here. And then parent it to motor 6D dot part 0, and then we'll do the same thing for the other attachment, except C1 and part 1. Now we can create the ball socket joint. Just gonna call it socket and then socket dot attachment 0 equals A0, socket dot attachment 1 equals A1, and socket dot parent equals motor 6D dot parent. However, doing this is going to arise a few problems. One being the head is going to bobble around a ton and shake your camera like an earthquake is happening. So to fix that, we can limit the amount of twistiness the socket has, if that makes any sense. So we want to know if the motor 6D is name is neck, which would mean that's the motor 6D that attaches the head to the torso. So we have to do socket dot limits enabled equals true, socket dot twist limits enabled has to also equal true, and the upper angle is basically how big of an angle is the socket limited to. And I usually do 10 for this because it limits the bobbling around a lot. And now all we have to do to clean this up is reset the cache. Now what we need to do is do humanoid.break joints enabled equals false. And this property basically means when a character dies and this is true, it breaks apart, which is default. But when this is not true, it stays together so that we have enough time to replace these. Also, now we will just call this ragdoll function on the character, and just a little bit more up here, disable the motor 6D so it's no longer acting on the parts. Oops, that's supposed to be false. And now I'll just do a little test. Oop, we got a little error. So it's actually not break joints enabled, it's break joints on death. Sorry about that. Just jumbled up my names a little bit. So now I'll try that again, see if it works. And I'm gonna reset, and there we go. So it ragdolled, but it looks like we did get another error here. So argument 2 missing or nil. Let's see. So basically we have to put true after this. I forgot that. So once again, I'm gonna test it. This just goes to show how easy it is to make mistakes, and gonna see if it works. So there we go. Completely works. Hope you liked it. If you learned something or just enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe. Bye.